You know, Johnny Ray, I know you hate the political system, and I find it to be a despicable thing as well, but I see that New Hampshire has the possibility for shoring up against bad laws and stopping them from even coming into play in the first place and repealing existing bad laws. It's possible here to actually write your own proposed legislation and get it to a state representative, and at the very least have it introduced, have the discussion had, because every piece of legislation in New Hampshire has to be discussed at a public hearing.
So,
You could
Johnny
at
Ray,
least
are you
create the
really
conversation.
one of these sorts that doesn't want to see people work within the legislative system? Is that true?
That's a powerful statement. We'll go with yes.
Okay.
Well, let's come back with more.
I have a question, and my question is...
Hold the question. We'll get back to that here. You can query Johnny Ray in moments. And also, you are welcome to join us here toll-free at 855-450-FREE. Your thoughts on the saggy pants ban. It's happening. Voted unanimously. We've got some more info on it coming up here. 855-450-FREE. This is Free Talk Live. So we're back to it. We're going to dig in further into the story here in a moment about the saggy pants ban. But Mark, you had a question for Johnny Ray, because I proposed earlier that the Free State Project was a good solution to stopping bad laws like this from happening. This ban on saggy pants, trying to control people's mode of dress. And I think that even though the politics system is awful, it actually is workable here in New Hampshire. I suspect that's what your question is going to be related to, but go ahead.
Yeah, so Johnny Ray essentially said that his solution to the problem of bad legislation was to not work within the legislative process. Does that sound something like? Am I in the ballpark here, Johnny Ray?
The problem with bad legislation is to not work within the legislative process.
You would agree that we have bad legislation here, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And the solution is to do something else besides running in campaigns for your favorite guy, or running for office yourself, or going to vote for people that you think are better than the tyrants,
or asking the politicians to pass a certain law, talking to your politicians, that kind of thing. It's not like I think that that's the greatest solution in the world. I certainly believe that it's an inefficient solution, but I guess my question would be, if this was you, if you were walking down the streets of Ocala and had the urge to show off your underpants by having your waist dip somehow more than 2 inches below the natural waistline, the waist of your pants, and you got nabbed for this, potentially jail and a $500 fine, is that right?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, so they toss your butt in jail over this, let's just say, and you're sitting in there and you think to yourself, well, how am I going to handle this? How are you going to handle that?
I'm sitting in a jail cell?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, because, see, the solution you have sounds a lot like, screw them, that's not my problem, to me.
I think that the political process is polluting. It's tough to say that about a guy like Mark Warden, who every time his name is mentioned, I talk about what a ray of sunshine he is.
He's the Porcupine real estate agent.
Yes.
And he's also the legislator of the year at least one time.
Twice.
Twice by the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance. So, a singular politician. There aren't too many like him.
I have a real dogmatic view of the question, and like I say, I think that the state is an evil institution, and the polling places are component parts of the state, and you should stay away from them because of that reason and that reason alone.
Yeah, but it doesn't really answer the question, what are you going to do?
If I'm sitting in jail, there's I don't know how to answer that question.
Well, I guess, what do you want from people? How do you want them to help you solve the problem? Because to me, if you've got bad legislation, there's not much you can do in the short term except try to get rid of the bad legislation. And the way that we do that is the legislative process.
If I was nabbed for it and I still had my day in court, my day in court was still ahead of me, then I would take that. I would take that opportunity to talk to the judge, because I think judges really have something going for them, and they can be spoken to.
Everyone I've ever talked to says, hey, the courtroom isn't the place to talk about whether a law is a good law or not. Yeah. You should talk to your legislator.
I saw it today. I was at the trial for Darrell W. Perry, our Friday night co-host, and I think we're going to hold off probably on talking about that in detail until Friday when he'll actually be here.
Makes sense.
But I was there today, and Judge Ed Burke was sitting in the court as normal at Keene District Court, and it's difficult to bring the Constitution up. The Constitution doesn't apply in the case because, well,
but the Constitution is a law.
The judge is only there to determine whether or not you have violated the ordinance or the statute. That's all. If you have a constitutional argument, you can make it in closing, and then, of course, you'll be, the Constitution won't factor into what the judge decides, and if you want, you could then appeal to the Supreme Court, and that's at least how it works in New Hampshire. Your mileage may vary locally, but they're not really interested in hearing any kind of principled arguments. All that judge is going to do is he's going to, take the evidence in from the officer. Officer's going to sit up on the stand. Officer's going to testify. They've worked for the police department for 10 years, and they're a law enforcement officer, and they saw you, sir, with your pants hanging down below your waist. In fact, when they saw you, they stopped you, pulled out their ruler. They measured the 2 inches. It was 3 inches. You were clearly in violation. All of this is indicated. The officer has testified to it on the stand. Your argument is invalid. You clearly violated this ordinance.
Right. Some officious, nosy politicians have written a law, and of course we all have to obey it.
Yeah.
Yep, and you're right. That happens time and time again.
And that's what would happen to you if you were busted
This is
for
why
the
I
saggy
think
pants.
I would like to make a distinction between a couple of things.
Okay.
When you've been nabbed for a crime, a quote unquote crime, an ordinance
A real
violation,
crime,
whatever.
Okay, so not possibly a non-crime. Then.
Yes, if I was nabbed by this, for
Gotcha.
example, in Ocala, no.
Yes, Ocala, Florida.
Okay, if I was nabbed for this, then that would be a different situation than me deciding whether or not I'm going out to vote because an agent has accosted me, and that is a different kind of a thing.
Right.
So
the law hits the rubber hits the road there, rather than stopping it before the car gets the screaming mad truck of bad legislation gets flying down the highway. You wait until it smacks you into the ditch.
So I do what I do then because I can't do anything else.
Indeed.
I have to do something.
You're forced into the position. Yeah,
And my question
do.
to you is this: if I don't believe in the legislative process, there's probably good reason I don't believe in the judicial process. I can assure you of that. So should I then just say, you know what? Let's assume you get a jury trial here. I'll just not go to my jury trial. I know Johnny Ray's there, and he's facing charges for some really stupid crap, but I'm just not going to be a juror there.
That's an excellent question. We've talked with Johnny Ray.
Oh, you got to register to vote to be a juror, too.
Yeah, well, driver's license also in New Hampshire. Johnny Ray, would you
Just
serve on a
depends.
jury? I want to get an answer from you there. I don't think we've talked about that with Johnny Ray because we certainly have talked about voting and working inside the system. More coming up. This is Free Talk Live. This is Free Talk Live. We're here to take your calls about what you want. All you have to do is dial in toll-free and bring up anything. 855-450-FREE. That's 855-450-3733. We've got Skype. Skype on into the show. Username LRN.FM. We started out talking about the saggy pants ban. Looks like it's happening. Voted unanimously in the city of Ocala, Florida. We'll continue. There's more detail on that. More, I think, quotes from the woman who sponsored the legislation. But it has also led into a larger conversation about working inside the system or not, as Johnny Ray would have it. He is very anti-working inside the system. And I have to say, there's a warm spot in my heart for that, Johnny Ray. I get it. It's terrible going to the State House, having to sit around and just do a lot of waiting and then maybe get to testify, feel like you've been ignored, and, do it all over again the next year in the hopes that maybe then whatever it is you're trying to pass, like marijuana decrim, will pass. And in the case of the marijuana thing, medical has passed in New Hampshire. It's the weakest, most pathetic excuse for a medical marijuana program, but it's passed.
In what way? Because I don't know it well at all.
And it could be improved over time. It's a step in the right direction.
What's
in
wrong?
what way is it weak?
Yeah, what's wrong with it?
So the New Hampshire, and I don't know if it's the weakest. It's just pretty pathetic.
Darn weak.
It's not as good, nowhere near as good as California, for instance. But there's no home grow allowed. The home grow was taken out, meaning that the patients in a lot of places like California can grow their own cannabis. Not in New Hampshire. That was removed because the governor said she would not sign the legislation unless that provision was removed. That's probably one of the biggies. The other is there's only 4 dispensaries that I think are going to be some kind of, I don't know if it's the state that's going to operate them or if the state's just going to put their seal of approval on them, but they're limiting the number of dispensaries. In a lot of places, there's not a limit to the number of dispensaries. So those are a couple things. Another one is the list of covered issues that one could be prescribed marijuana for. Some would argue it's kind of on the conservative side. Others would say that maybe there's a loophole in there. So that one's yet to really be seen as to how it's going to actually play out. It's slow in implementation. The cards aren't available yet.
It's been 18 months.
It's been a year and a half, at this point, and it's bad. I mean, it's not the best, but it's still a step in the right direction. And that step would not have happened if it hadn't been for all the efforts of these folks, good people who went down, many of them, some of them crippled. There's one guy who's like completely paralyzed in a chair. In fact, he's so bad off now he can't come down to the State House, but he came down for like 10 years to testify from his chair device, body moving. It's not really a wheelchair because he can't move himself. He's got to move it with, I don't know if it's his tongue or whatever he does, but he's pretty paralyzed. Anyway, really persuasive people like that coming down and finally convincing these politicians after a decade to do something that was semi the right thing. It's frustrating as hell. There's no doubt about it. I mean, this guy's going to die very soon, and it's a surprise that he didn't die before the medical marijuana program. I mean, he may even die before it's implemented at this point. But nonetheless, he took the time, he put it in, and there were results. I mean, that could result, Johnny Ray, in people who are crippled or sick not being arrested in the future. Isn't that worth the effort? Even though it was a tremendous level of effort, isn't it worth it?
You're assuming that it happened only because of the efforts of these people who came to the Capitol and testified and so forth and so on.
Well, it also happened thanks to the efforts of the state representatives who proposed it and also argued for it and testified in favor of it as well.
It would seem inarguable that it happened when it happened due to the efforts of those people. I do think that politics tends to be a sort of a trailing indicator of sort of the public zeitgeist.
Yes, I think that it happened in large measure because the prevailing opinion on the subject is that marijuana should be legal. Everybody knows that. We've known it for a long time. And they finally kind of got with the times. And I think all you need to do is change the culture.
But they didn't do it on their own volition. And I agree with you that the culture does need to change and that politics follows behind it by, in some cases, decades. That's all true. But if nobody put it forward, if everybody just sat back and took the Johnny Ray approach and did nothing, then it never would have been brought forth. No one ever would have proposed it.
If everybody sat back and did the Johnny Ray approach, they would be desperate for attention and they would do things that they thought we wanted.
Yeah, you really did fall into this trap, by the way.
What trap?
You said if everybody did. And the fact is, everybody isn't going to do
something.
But everybody's not going to do anything.
Right. I didn't mean to suggest everybody actually would do something.
I understand. So that's the one thing that the people who want to ignore the political system have is if everybody did such and such.
They won't, though, yeah.
Right, but they won't. And so let's stop talking about fantasy worlds where the fact is that people that disagree with you, Johnny Ray, are going to go to the Capitol, and they're going to pay off politicians, they're going to buy lobbyists, they're going to threaten, they're going to cajole, they're going to get pictures of mistresses, they're going to do whatever it takes.
The cops are going to go to keep prohibition around.
Right,
you
they're
can
going to
damn well count on
unions,
that.
They're going to extract money.
The state and the statists are pragmatic. I'm going to go back to that Dan Sanchez article. There's always going to be statists who, if they witness a libertarian culture in their country, they're going to effect libertarian policies in their governments, whether they are really truly on board with it or not. You don't need real libertarians to soil themselves.
What you need to do is have real libertarians talk to those real politicians. That happens in New Hampshire. Here, there are stories. You can talk to people who will tell you that they started talking to Representative such and such in 2004 when they moved here. And then in 2008, they helped Representative such and such change their mind on the marijuana issue. Now, I'm just picking this one issue, but there are examples of people. Dennis Goddard will call in and he'll tell you about how this has happened, where people have created a relationship. People who are liberty-minded activists have created relationships with some of these state representatives and found the friendlier ones, and even changed the minds of some who weren't on board with these ideas. It wasn't like a bunch of new people got elected, although that does happen a lot here in New Hampshire because you don't get paid more than $100 a year generally to be a state representative. But my point being that it was the efforts of these people directly in the State House and just around the State House, just talking to these folks outside of the State House, the meeting room, outside of the meeting room, in the hallway, having discussions with these people, seeing them on the streets, talking to them there, going out to lunch with them. I mean, this is networking, and it works here in New Hampshire. It doesn't work in a lot of other places. You can't talk to state reps in New York State or California or Florida, but here
49
you can.
states in the union have a lawyer industrial complex occupying their state house.
I realize
I'm all for. Go ahead, Mark. Sorry.
One state doesn't. Go ahead.
I'm all for talking to people, any people.
Okay,
but you don't have to talk to them on government property. Not that
that's true, but aren't you essentially doing the same thing if you see them at a party and you hit them up with some new ideas? Hold that thought. Let's go to Glenn in Philly. You're on Free Talk Live, Glenn. And I realize I still have to get to the jury duty question because we didn't get to that. Glenn, are you with us in Philly?
Yes, I am here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you now. Go ahead, sir.
Okay. Infrequent listener, first-time caller.
Welcome.
Boy, it's just so refreshing in a world of 7 billion people where 150,000 people die every day, and we have wars raging and disease and plagues and all kinds of other really scary, important things going on. I hear you guys stepping up to defend the rights of immature, narcissistic, underachieving, defiant, slackers who live in mommy and daddy's basement and don't really do anything productive.
Are you
And
referring
like
to
go
saggy
around
pants wearers, sir?
people with their pants. Hmm?
I was just trying to clarify that you were talking about
down.
saggy pants people.
Yes, immature, underachieving, defiant, narcissistic.
So are you
slackers
saying you think they
who
should be put in
are
jail?
calling it
Do you think people should be put in jail for wearing saggy pants?
I think they should have had their butts smacked when they were younger and learned how to be mature.
All right, but now they are
useful
wearing
adult
saggy
people.
pants. So what do you do about it, Glenn? Hang on, we'll bring it back if you have more comments.
Grumpy old 40-year-old said the same thing about Glenn's style when he was a teenager.
More coming up here on Free Talk Live. But you're welcome to share your thoughts and experience here. The toll-free number is 855-450-FREE.
And I would like to add that there's no villain until there's an act, until somebody has been caught and
like the politicians. I mean, those guys are actual villains. Like, they really are doing bad things day in and day out, passing laws to destroy people's lives, like these folks.
Well, I was going to say that all they've done is pass a law, and it doesn't become a crime until somebody gets their hands laid on them and a cop is dragging somebody away.
Still, though, it's the
Simply on the
politicians who are
pretext
responsible for that.
They played their part, but they didn't lay their hands on someone else.
That's true. They have their henchmen doing it, and they have their the henchmen are doing the dirty work for them. If you hire somebody to put a hit out, or if you put a hit out on somebody, if you put a hit out on Mark, you're just as guilty as the person who executes the hit.
I'm not convinced of that.
You don't think so?
No, that's kind of a struggle that I've had. I've never had it conclusively proven to my satisfaction that if you contract with somebody to kill them, then you are a villain.
Wow, I don't know what I could say to convince you of that, Johnny Ray. What is it that makes you think you would not be a villain for doing that?
There's a phrase that I don't know where it came from that I've kept with me, and it goes like this. First is the deed. And before the deed happens, nothing of importance has happened. The deed is the only thing that counts for anything.
But isn't paying someone to kill somebody a deed also?
It's putting money in somebody else's hand. If they paid them and then the guy didn't kill the person.
So the politicians are irrelevant. It's the cops on the street and the soldiers in uniform. It's the privates and
Johnny Ray, I'm disturbed by this.
cops.
We're going to come back with more. 855-450-FREE. You can share your thoughts as well. Coming up, hour 2, Free Talk Live. So I had asked a question, or I didn't get to actually ask the question. I'd wanted to. I teased it, and we never actually got around to it in the last hour because the conversation about the saggy pants ban went around into a larger discussion about how to change things in society, and you're an advocate, Johnny Ray, of not doing anything within the system that you can avoid. If you're forced into it by, say, getting a ticket from a police officer, you might go to trial. You might actually kind of work as much in the system as you can in that instance, just because you feel like you've been forced into a position. But that led me to another question about jury nullification. And actually, it was Mark who I think suggested this. But the question I had was, would you participate? As somebody who seems to be principled in a way against participating at, say, going to a city council meeting and speaking, running for political office, even voting for people running for political office. These are all things you've spurned verbally on the air. You've shown non-interest and even some vehemence against these things. Going out and lobbying politicians, going to the state house, testifying, all of these things you're not willing to do. What about going?
It only encourages them.
What about if you get called to jury duty? What would you do then?
I would go. I would go because I think, speaking out of naivety, that I could enjoy it. I could go in and it's much more personal. It's man to man. And that's also why I do what I do in courtrooms. Ask what I consider to be telling questions of the judge, fundamental questions. How does he get paid? Sir, on March 10th, did you witness me harming anyone or their property? So on and so forth. And I'm actually talking to a person, and it's real. I have to be there. I wouldn't choose to be there, but I have to be there, and I do it that way. But voting is you getting in a line and going and dipping your finger in the ink and observing all the forms. And
isn't participating in a jury voting?
Yes, but
your excuse is that it's personal, so you're okay with it?
And I might get some personal enjoyment out of it. So I have a selfish reason for wanting to do jury duty.
Certainly.
But I might get disabused of that notion the first time, and then following times, would I go if I thought that I could help set one person free? Maybe.
Okay, so that gives me some hope, Johnny Ray. If you feel like you could set somebody free,
then I might come to your trial if I was on a jury, and I might try to get you free. If I felt like it, right? Like, I've got things to do. I'm a busy man. I got pigs to feed. I've got commercials to write for people. I've got telephone calls to make. I might come. See, this is the thing, is I just can't get excited about people that have this feeling about the political system. The political system is a wretched, evil machine that wishes to grind people in its jaws.
It does.
And when somebody has an opportunity to step up and pull somebody else out of those jaws, I think they ought to take it. I'm not saying it's the moral thing to do, because I don't think you can claim that a person in a coma is somehow acting immorally. But I really do have to say that I think it's the right thing to do, is to step up and attempt to pull your brethren out of the clashing jaws.
I'm going to hesitantly agree with you. I think that it's likely that I would at any time go and be a part of a jury, just because I would feel definitely like I had some real agency there.
You'd feel like your vote made a difference?
Yes.
So what if it turned out, let's just say that somebody's running for governor, and this person running for governor,
like Ian, our co-host,
would actually pardon all nonviolent drug offenders upon election to office. One of the first acts on the first day of taking office is to pardon all nonviolent offenders.
And probably not very many acts after that.
Well, I don't know what you're suggesting would happen there, Mark, but regardless, if you knew that that was absolutely a sure thing, that was going to happen, like you could actually believe this politician that they were going to really do it, and it turned out that politician had lost by one vote, would you feel bad about it?
No, because no, I wouldn't, because if that was the case, then that's the way it went down, and that means that there is some kind of culture there that will produce the same result again, and it'll happen without my participation.
I see. But you could have gotten people out of prison, a year too early.
Okay, I'm sorry, this is ridiculous. Ross Perot ran for president in, 1996 or
92.
He got some large percentage of the vote,
Yeah.
and in fact had this crazy campaign where he dropped out because of ninjas and then came back. So I mean, anybody who voted for him is suspect as far as I'm concerned. But this was the momentum of the independent vote that was out there. Anderson ran, I think it was in '84. There were these independent candidates out there. Independent candidates haven't gotten votes like that in a decade and a half. Where's this idea that somehow, there are moments in time that it is ripe to strike, and after that all the wind goes out of the sails. And I disagree that just because you had this liberty-oriented candidate that might have gotten into governorship in one election, that 2 years later somehow that candidate's just a shoo-in.
Ross Perot is not an example he's not a product of a culture that he's not the result I want.
He's not a liberty-oriented candidate. He is, however, an independent candidate, and one could claim that because an independent candidate did well in 1992, that therefore in 1996 an independent candidate should have done even better, and then by 2000 we should have had an independent candidate in office.
Well,
there's an indication of momentum.
Independent candidate, I don't think that's relevant. Independent versus Republican versus Democrat, that's all dross. It doesn't mean anything. I don't think the point is relevant. I think a libertarian culture versus a authoritarian culture is a much bigger difference, and it means more.
Let's come back with more. You can share your thoughts with us. 855-450-FREE. Is Johnny Ray on the right track here, or is he delusional? 855-450-FREE. You can take control here. Share your thoughts on Free Talk Live. More coming up. We've been talking about various different sort of tangents that have all come from this discussion that we started the show out, where we haven't even finished the story from ABC News about the Florida City Council in Ocala that has voted unanimously to ban saggy pants from their city. Possible jail time, fine of up to $500 if you get caught with pants below 2 inches below your waistline. So that's kind of the subject at hand, but it's led into a larger discussion about working within the system. How do you change things like this? Johnny Ray, I think, I share Mark's critique earlier, where it sounds like you just don't care about these people. Like, you just feel like, oh, well, yeah, if people want things to change, eventually they'll change. The politicians will catch up with it 40 years later, and, then the law will change. And you just kind of hands off. You don't want to do anything to help these folks out. Or do you? How would you, like, the question Mark asked earlier was, what would you do if you were caught for the saggy pants ban? But another question I have is, would you do anything for these people today, even though you aren't a saggy pants wearer?
I will tell the radio audience that it's a crime to lay your hands on somebody and drag them off and throw them into a jail for wearing their pants a certain way.
Okay.
I'll do that. What else will I do for the unfortunate teens of Ocala, Florida? I don't think I'm going to do anything else besides that.
Gotcha. Yeah, I don't blame you. I mean, you can only put your time into so much. And, some people, clothing freedom is going to be their issue that they want to put time and effort into. I just feel like it seems almost callous when you say that if you could have been the one vote that decided whether or not hundreds of people are released from prison cells here in New Hampshire, that you wouldn't have cast that vote. That you wouldn't feel bad.
You asked me if I would feel regret about it. I don't remember if I answered it.
The answer's no. It was what you said.
Okay. And I guess because the reason is that the likelihood of me influencing that was basically zero.
You couldn't have predicted that it would have been a one-vote election. That's certainly true.
Not at all. And
wouldn't have known that in advance.
Yeah. So for me to have not participated, and then for you to excoriate me for not feeling the proper level of regret is ridiculous.
Fair enough.
And again, a jury is different. That is truly defensive voting. Mm-hmm. And when there's a man there and you're one of 9 people or something, then I wouldn't feel silly participating. I wouldn't feel as stupid and ridiculous as I would if I went to the polling place to vote for President of the United States.
So this is an argument, the mathematic argument against voting. Now, I can find this.
That's part of it. No, the fundamental argument is that you shouldn't encourage them.
Okay, so here's what my question is that are they encouraged when they have liberty-oriented candidates who are running against them and those liberty-oriented candidates win? Like,
That's pretty discouraging.
Right. Statists is who you're talking about encouraging, and statists are not encouraged when they lose.
There will be statists who will pragmatically. You don't need libertarians to participate. There will be people who politicians of all stripes who lick their thumb and stick it up in the air, and they'll do what the rest of they'll do what they see the culture doing, even if they're behind. And
well, that's not true, because look, the Ron Paul campaign ran in 2008, and Ron Paul said the politicians asked him all the time, how do you do it? How do you get these wild maniacs out there after you? Well, he said, I just support personal liberty, and I'm against the Fed, and all the things that he's at. Where are the politicians that did that in the national government? Are they elected? No, they're not, because that system doesn't work. These politicians know that they don't really care about votes because
I'm sorry,
they know.
Could you repeat that point for me?
Sure. Ron Paul got, lots of politicians. He told in interviews, Ron Paul said that many politicians in Washington D.C., the current disgusting S-heads, that hold the office, are asking him questions like, "How do you do it, Ron? How did you get people to be so rabidly in favor of you?" And Ron Paul doesn't know. He just continued to be a principled, liberty-oriented candidate, and then enough liberty-oriented people got behind him and shoved him forward. The guy didn't run to the front of the pack. He was jammed to the front of the pack.
Wasn't it Ron Paul's campaign that kind of brought you on board, Johnny Ray?
Not to the philosophy of it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What did he bring you on board with then? Free State Project?
His performance in New Hampshire convinced me. What I consider to be poor showing in the Republican primaries of 2008 convinced me that I needed to come up and be a part of the Free State Project because I thought that he would do much better.
Does it feel ironic to be sitting here now because of a politician while arguing against the political process?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I find almost no fault with Ron Paul except for the statements that you called him out on this show regarding immigration. I don't know if he's changed his views about that. He believes there should be a United States, and I disagree.
Yeah,
and so
he's not perfect.
As part of if there's going to be a United States, there has to be a border, and certain things follow from that.
So we can come back to hiring a hitman here in a little bit because I thought that was an interesting conversation that we kind of just barely touched on. Let's go to Nathan. He is on Skype in Texas. Go ahead, Nathan.
Hey, everyone.
Hey.
Well, that's actually what I wanted to talk about, but I was wondering if for the radio audience we could maybe dial it down to something less of less import, maybe perhaps I don't know, like maybe egging someone's house, because I think Johnny Ray has hit on a distinction which is important, which is this: what are the limits of how much responsibility you can attribute to someone who's acting on behalf of someone else. So I think you have to allow for what I call the interposition principle, where if you interpose or put yourself between an actor and the result, you diminish the causality of the first person or the first actor. Do you agree with that?
Sounds
Can you say
sensible.
that again?
Is that the person who's committing the deed? Is that the interpositor?
Stand by. I want you to re-explain that here in a moment, Nathan. We're going to come back to you here. The toll-free number is 855-450-FREE. I have to admit, I was in the middle of some technical difficulties there. I didn't really follow what he was saying. We'll come back with more here in moments. 855-450-FREE. And I think our streams are working again at freetalklive.com. There's more coming up in moments. So let's go back to Nathan. He is still with us in Texas. Nathan, you were commenting on the discussion we'd had about hitmen, and Johnny Ray saying that he wasn't so sure if there was really anything wrong. And I'm putting words in your mouth, Johnny Ray, so correct me if I'm wrong here. But you were not so sure that it was really that wrong to hire the hitman. To you, the issue is the actual hitman and whether or not he does the job. But I was saying that it is a crime to hire a hitman because you are asking for someone's life to be taken or someone to be harmed. But Nathan had some comments. But am I putting words in your mouth, Johnny Ray? I don't want to sum up what you were saying inappropriately.
I think there is a very, very important distinction between talking about killing somebody and wringing their neck until they're dead.
Well, there's also a distinction between talking about killing someone and then hiring someone to do the job. Right?
Well, I'm putting the hiring someone to do the job. That's talking about it. That's saying I'll pay you $50,000 to kill this person,
to wring their neck until they're dead.
Yes, there's a real distinction between the two, and I think the guy who commits the deed has done a much worse thing. Although
I'll give you that. I'll give you that.
I don't know what the distinction really means, because I think that there is opprobrium for both for the talker and the doer, but
should the hitman or the hirer of the hitman, the client, I guess, should that person? And I agree with you that the act itself of the killing is certainly more egregious than the hiring of the killing. There's no doubt, because if the person who wanted to hire another individual couldn't find someone to do the dirty work, maybe nothing would ever end up happening. But should that person be guilty of murder? Should a person hiring a hitman be by proxy guilty of murder?
Philosophically, I'm going to say yes, but guilty, like in a court of law, these concepts don't really mean anything to me. And in my world, there would be businesses that would follow criminals around and surveil them their whole life, because I'm quite certain that with all the money that we spend on criminal justice every year against everybody, criminals and non-criminals alike, a market system could produce something that was completely nonviolent, that didn't cage anybody, only focused on people who'd actually committed crimes. And if we spent the same amount of money, we could hire a team of 15 people to follow every criminal around and, number one, prevent them from committing crimes in the future. And number two, maybe if this was right according to my society, I'm not so sure yet, make life hell for them.
Let's go back to Nathan. He's with us on Skype. Nathan, you were trying to make a point in the last segment, and I apologize. I wasn't paying enough attention. Go ahead.
It's funny you mentioned jails, because I think Robert Murphy did a talk recently where he said criminals would voluntarily report to jail because no one else would take them.
But I can see that.
Aside from that, so the principle I was trying to articulate, and I think Johnny Ray is trying to also favors, is this interposition idea, which means that if we're trying to discern who has caused an action to occur, people who intervene in the causal chain can make people before them lose responsibility. So, for example, if I lose my knife on the street and then someone takes it and uses it to commit a crime, I'm not responsible for that.
Obviously.
Because they've intervened in the causal chain ahead of me. And the same principle would apply if you're, like, say, a gun seller. I'm sure none of you would want people selling guns to be held responsible for everything that the customer of the shop does, right?
Right.
Or car salespeople to be responsible for somebody who commits vehicular homicide.
All right, so how are you going to tie this into hiring a hitman? I'm not real clear on that.
Well, because what you would say is that and I think what Johnny Ray wants to say is that the hitman, or the agent, shall we say, is intervening in this chain. In other words, there's the person who wants to commit the crime, but his intentions are nullified by this principle because the agent is the one who's actually going forward and doing it. In other words, it's almost as if the metaphorical knife has been dropped and now the agent has picked it up and is committing the crime. And it kind of reminds me of these Supreme Court cases where they talk about incitement to riot. I don't know if you know any of them, like Hess v. Indiana, Brandenburg v. Ohio. They deal with cases where, like, you have a Klan member and he's talking about, let's get our vengeance against them all, and that sort of thing.
Yeah,
And,
there's a difference between somebody shouting a political message and what they would like to see happen, like, we ought to string them up from the rooftops or whatever. Saying what you'd like to see happen and then somebody going and putting it into effect is a whole different matter, a whole different ball of wax than sitting down and giving somebody $20,000 to go and kill someone, or giving them $2,000 to go and beat someone to, close to death.
Also, what you need to consider is that the average person is going to sit there and say, I wouldn't be motivated by somebody who says, let's string them up. But the average person understands that they likely would commit a terrible crime for enough money.
I don't know if the average person would do that, Mark. Nathan, are you saying
I think we need to do a poll on that.
Are you saying you don't think that the person hiring the hitman is responsible?
Well, he is responsible.
Okay, great. Well, we're on board then. Thanks for the call. Appreciate it. Toll-free number is 855-450-FREE. That's 855-450-3733. Your thoughts on hiring a hitman, saggy pants, whatever's on your mind goes on Free Talk Live.
Free Talk Live, 7 nights a week from 7 to 10 Eastern, live on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.